Welcome back to the channel, folks, where we dive into the wild, wonderful world of men transforming into women in all kinds of fascinating ways. If that's your vibe, don't forget to smash that subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. Now let's jump right into today's story.
Chapter 1: Debugging Romance. Nick Wolfe had always believed the world ran on logic lines of code, neat algorithms, predictable input and output. Unfortunately, no one had bothered to patch the bug in his dating life. He was 28, a senior developer at a startup with more caffeine than funding, and the only thing he'd ever managed to seduce was a stubborn Python script. The fluorescent lights of the break room buzzed overhead as Nick stabbed at a wilting piece of lettuce. His salad, a sad affair of prepackaged greens and anemic cherry tomatoes, was about as exciting as his Friday night had been. He scrolled through his phone, reviewing the digital post-mortem of yet another failed date. No new messages, not surprising. He pushed his glasses up the bridge of his nose, wondering where exactly he'd gone wrong. Was it when he'd explained the elegant simplicity of blockchain technology? Or perhaps when he'd corrected her pronunciation of espresso? The break room door swung open with a confident push, and the scent of Drakkar Noir announced Brian's arrival before the man himself appeared. Brian Kavanagh, sales extraordinaire, possessor of perfect teeth, and living proof that charisma couldn't be learned from a YouTube tutorial. Brian flopped into the seat across from him, his designer shirt somehow remaining unwrinkled. "You look like someone deleted your source code, man. Was last night that bad?" Nick's groan could have powered a small turbine. Define bad. If awkward silences were a sport, I'd have Olympic gold. Jesus, what happened? Brian leaned forward, genuinely curious despite the gleam of amusement in his eyes. Nothing happened, that's the problem. Nick ran a hand through his already disheveled hair. She kept checking her phone, by the time I'd explained how quantum encryption works. Brian grinned, white teeth flashing like warning signs. Maybe next time, try not talking about quantum encryption before the appetizers. Some women find intelligence attractive, Nick muttered, defensively stabbing another piece of lettuce. Brian gave him a look that was half pity, half exasperation. And some women find cockatoos attractive, doesn't mean they want to date one. He mimed a bird's crest rising. All noise, flashy display, no substance. Are you comparing my conversational skills to a tropical bird? Nick asked, eyebrow raised. Hey, at least birds get laid, Brian shrugged, then winced as Nick threw a cherry tomato at him. Waste of food, man. The clip-clop of heels against linoleum announced a new arrival. Laura Chen swept in with the precision of a heat-seeking missile, balancing 2 lattes and her phone with the kind of dexterity that made Nick wonder if she'd been a juggler in a past life. Unlike most of the tech team who dressed like they'd grabbed the first clean, or cleanish, item from their bedroom floor, Laura made business casual look like high fashion. She slid a coffee across to Nick with a sympathetic smile. Rough night. Nick accepted the latte, inhaling the comforting scent of espresso and artificial hazelnut. If by rough you mean catastrophic, then yeah. Laura's eyes sparkled with mischief as she pulled out a chair. What did you do this time? Tell her you debug code for fun. Nick made a face. It's a conversation starter. Brian snorted so hard coffee nearly came out his nose. It's a conversation killer, like a verbal chloroform. It is not, Nick protested, but his heart wasn't in it. Even he knew his romantic technique had all the finesse of a DDoS attack. Laura leaned in, her glossy black hair falling forward in a curtain. For the record, I'd totally swipe right on a guy who could fix my Wi-Fi. That's because you're weird, Laura, Brian said, but his tone was affectionate. You once told me the sexiest thing a man can do is organize his desktop icons. Laura shrugged, unbothered. Takes one to know one. Anyway, you're both lucky. My last date spent the whole night talking about his crypto portfolio. By dessert, I was praying for a blackout. She took a sip of her latte, leaving a perfect red lipstick print on the rim. At least with Nick's dates, there's the possibility of learning something useful. See, Nick gestured triumphantly at Laura. Some women appreciate intellectual stimulation. The key word being some, Brian pointed out. And Laura's standards are skewed because the bar for tech bros is literally on the floor. Hey, Laura protested, though she didn't actually disagree. She'd once told Nick that dating in Silicon Valley was like trying to find a unicorn in a herd of very loud, very opinionated donkeys. Nick smiled, feeling a little lighter. For all his social missteps, he'd lucked into the best friends a hopeless nerd could ask for. Laura, with her razor-sharp wit and unexpected kindness. Brian, whose outward bravado hid a genuinely good heart. What you need, Brian said, leaning back in his chair with the confidence of a man about to dispense wisdom, is to stop treating dates like debugging sessions. Women aren't code. You can't just isolate and fix the error. If they were code, Nick muttered, I'd at least understand the syntax. Laura snorted. Maybe that's your problem. You're trying to parse women like a computer language when really. Her words cut off as a commotion near the front desk caught their attention. A wiry older man in a tweed jacket that had seen better decades was hauling in a stack of boxes, each plastered with a garish logo, ELMORE Tech, seeing is believing. Brian raised an eyebrow, lowering his voice. Who's the new Gandalf? Laura swiped through her phone, pulling up an email. Oh, right, company-wide VR demo, some new relationship simulation project, supposedly state-of-the-art. She squinted at the screen. The memo says it's revolutionary interpersonal technology, which is corpo speak for porn, Brian suggested. Sex sells, Laura said with a shrug, but I think it's more like those empathy training programs. You know, walk a mile in someone else's shoes. Nick perked up, his curiosity piqued. VR for relationships sounds risky. Brian smirked, elbowing Nick playfully. Maybe you'll finally get that girlfriend, Nick, even if she's just software. Ha, ha. Nick's deadpan delivery didn't hide the flush creeping up his neck. At least she wouldn't check her Instagram during dinner. Low bar, my friend, Laura murmured, watching as the older man arranged his boxes with surprising energy for someone who looked old enough to have programmed on punch cards. Mr. Elmore himself soon approached their table, a man out of time, with wild silver hair that Einstein would have envied and a smile that seemed to know every secret in the room. His tweed jacket had leather patches at the elbows, and his bow tie was slightly askew, giving him the appearance of an absent-minded professor from Central Casting. He set a box on the table with a solid thunk, nodding to each of them in turn. You three look like you could use a new perspective. Nick glanced at the label, prototype, the girlfriend experience. Subtle, Laura muttered under her breath. Elmore's eyes twinkled behind round spectacles. Sometimes the best way to understand love is to see it from the other side. The other side? Nick asked, unable to stop himself. The feminine side, my boy, Elmore said, tapping the box. Walk in a woman's heels, so to speak. Brian leaned back, crossing his arms. What, is this thing going to make us irresistible? Elmore's smile widened, revealing teeth too perfect to be natural. It'll make you see what you've been missing. There was something in his tone that sent a shiver down Nick's spine, not unpleasant, but unsettling, like standing at the edge of a high dive. With that cryptic comment, Elmore moved on to the next table, leaving a trail of curiosity and, in Nick's case, something more electric. The idea of understanding women, even virtually, was tempting. Maybe too tempting. Okay, that wasn't weird at all, Brian said, watching Elmore's retreating back. Laura grinned, nudging Nick with her elbow. You're not actually thinking of trying it, are you? Nick hesitated, his fingers drumming a nervous rhythm on the tabletop. I mean, what's the worst that could happen? Brian waggled his eyebrows dramatically. Famous last words. If you start wearing heels to work, we're staging an intervention. I don't know, Laura said, eyeing Nick speculatively. He's got the bone structure for it. Those cheekbones, some women would kill for that definition. Nick self-consciously touched his face. I do not have feminine cheekbones. You kind of do, Brian agreed, like a young David Bowie. I'll take that as a compliment, Nick said, straightening slightly. Laura laughed, the sound bright and genuine. Don't knock it till you've tried it. Nick in heels, now that's a simulation I'd pay to see. My feet hurt just thinking about it, Nick said, but he couldn't help smiling. You know those torture devices are designed by men, right? Of course they are, Laura said. Men design the shoes, women suffer in them, and then men complain when we take too long to get ready. The circle of life. When you put it that way, Nick mused, maybe I do need some perspective. Now he's getting it, Brian said, pantomiming a golf clap. Their laughter rolled through the break room, warm and teasing. But behind Nick's smile, a question flickered. What if he really could understand what women wanted? Just for a night, to step outside his skin and into a world he'd spent his whole life trying to decode. What secrets might he learn? What insights could he gain? He barely noticed Laura's lingering glance, the way her smile held something more than just friendly teasing, or how Brian watched him with a mix of amusement and concern. For now, there was only the box, the promise of something new, and the feeling that, for once, the next line of code might just change everything.